Well, good morning, everybody. It's my huge pleasure as Chair of Universities Wales to welcome you to this preview event. We're in a conversation involving businesses, government, universities, as to how we can build from the pandemic, building a future with economic prosperity and social justice. If you had to sum up this event in one phrase, it's about working together. Working together with our colleagues at the Learned Society of Wales to have this event today, working together with the Higher Education Funding Council for Wales, who've supported the development and implementation of the Wales Innovation Network, which of course is a good example of the benefits of us working together in Wales. In a moment, you'll hear from serious leaders in business, higher education and government about how we as universities work together with those who shape public policy and business decisions. We are partners who explore, who test and refine, who discover and develop, and who innovate together. WIN itself, which will be driven by senior leaders from all of our Welsh universities, is fundamentally about working together as universities and our funding council. It's about sharing insight and expertise, collectively being as effective as we can be in the growing innovation ecosystem in Wales, and winning research funding for Welsh universities in this ever more competitive world. And today is about working together with you, everyone in this event. We have a panel that represents many different perspectives: research councils, government, business and academia. And just as importantly, we have all of you, 200 or so stakeholders who all have an interest and a commitment to innovation. We're delighted that Professor Reid, who has been so instrumental in helping us with Professor Paul Boyle to create WIN, that Graham is going to open our discussion today with some key thoughts, and we're looking forward to hearing your views. So in welcoming you to this preview event, may I ask just one thing of you? Please do challenge, please explore, and do engage with us both in the next hour or so, and as we go forward in making the Wales Innovation Network a vibrant reality. Thank you very much. I now think I'm handing over to Professor Graham Reid.
No, it's me at the moment, Julie.
Oh, sorry, Hal.
That's fine, that's fine. So thank you very much, Julie. Thank you for the opportunity to chair this very, very exciting and important event. I'm Howell Thomas, I'm the president of the Learned Society of Wales. The LSW is Wales's national academy covering the range of disciplines: arts, humanities, social sciences, and the STEM subjects. We're an all Wales organisation ourselves, so we have a particular interest in the opportunity that is now being developed through this network. Croeso cynnes iawn I chi gyd bore yma o prynhawn yma nawr i'r cyfarfod pwysig hyn, I gyd yn edrych ymlaen i'r sgwrs sydd I ddod. So with those few words of introduction, it's my privilege and pleasure now to invite a colleague to show a recording that Vaughan Gethin, the MS Minister of the Economy, has prepared. In so doing, can I just give you a little bit of advance notice? We know that the sound level is rather low on this, so if you need to increase the sound level, then please do so now. So hand over to hear from Vaughan then, please, from Vaughan Gethin. Diolch yn fawr.
Many thanks for your kind introduction, and can I welcome everyone to the launch of the Wales Innovation Network at this event, sponsored by the Learned Society of Wales and Universities Wales. The initiative behind the Wales Innovation Network is a direct result of recommendations made by Graham Reid's Strength in Diversity report, and I know you're going to hear more from Professor Reid later on. First of all, let me put on record the fact that the Welsh Government recognises the critical importance that research and innovation has to play in delivering our new programme for government. Our aspirations for a healthier, greener, fairer, more prosperous and more equal Wales can only be achieved within an environment that is innovating and transforming. Of equal importance is collaboration. The collaboration that this network will enable, collaboration between the governments of the United Kingdom at cabinet level, across departments and sectors. Unless we work together, we cannot unlock the true potential of our investment in innovation, from groundbreaking research through to commercialisation. Traditionally, Wales has invested ERDF money into innovation, and this has generated great impact within our economy and for our citizens. A recent independent appraisal of our Smart Cymru programme shows that we assisted a total of 420 individual businesses during the period from 2014 to 2020. These firms were offered a combined total of 24.2 million from 576 separate grants, which leveraged in £33 million in private sector investment. This report went on to find that almost half the grants were invested in sectors of the economy which generate an average gross value added of £80,000 per employee, which is more than twice the Welsh average. I recognise the loss of these funds will be of great concern, and I am committed to seeking opportunities with the UK Government on how replacement funds can be directed towards Welsh innovation priorities in the context of both place-based but also levelling up. We recognise that in order to encourage collaboration and maximise innovations, the impact of innovation, strategic direction is needed. Our current business innovation strategy, whilst a great example of policy of its time, predates Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic. Work to move forward with a new strategy is underway. I know that many of you have already been involved in this. Initial research and engagement events have resulted in the development of a vision for a representative new strategy. This was shortly considered by relevant ministers, but I and my officials are committed to an ongoing conversation with all stakeholders as this work develops. I want a key plank of the new strategy to be a philosophy of research with a purpose, which will be able to unlock access to UK research and innovation funding, something which is at the heart of Professor Reid's work. I'm keen for us to use the strategy as a framework for local, regional and national delivery. We're being urged to simplify the Welsh innovation ecosystem, to make it more streamlined, dynamic and effective, both within government and with the government's interaction with stakeholders like yourselves, making collaboration across sectors easier and more fruitful. We need to explore further how we do just that. We do know that innovation is happening across departments in the Welsh Government and the services that we work with. My previous portfolio led me to see some fantastic examples where innovation can improve the delivery of healthcare services and, crucially, the lives of the public. What struck me on many of these visits was the small-scale nature of a number of these projects and how difficult it has always seemed to scale these across Wales. We need to do even better at removing the barriers to this happening. A strong emerging theme is a need for the purpose-focused research I referred to earlier, or mission-based innovation. We need to invest in innovation that seeks to solve some of our trickiest societal challenges. Our successful Small Business Research Initiative programme has sought to do this. Just recently, we launched challenges to seek solutions to reducing the long outpatient waiting lists, and we've tested devices that could be more efficient in sanitising settings such as schools during the pandemic. Challenge-led procurement is something we can mobilise quickly at a time of crisis, but also a mechanism we can use to develop and test new technologies in order to build public sector confidence and to solve our greatest unmet needs. I'm confident that this network will be an important contributor, not only to our strategy, but also how we innovate into the future and deliver impact with and for the people of Wales. I urge you all to engage with the new strategy developments over the summer, and I look forward to seeing the outcome of those during the autumn term. Many thanks for inviting me again, Diolch yn fawr iawn, and I really do hope you enjoy the rest of the event and working together for the rest of this term. Many thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Gweinidog, for a very, very interesting presentation and speech, highlighting the opportunities and the challenges. So, diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you very much. We move on now to a series of 4 more pre-recorded videos, starting with a video from the Right Honourable Simon Hart, MP, Secretary of State for Wales. So I think we'll just move on to that without further ado. Thank you.
Hi everybody, it's Simon Hart here in the Wales office in London, wishing you well for the Wales Innovation Network conference today. Thank you very much for spending all the time and energy that you have on these really exciting proposals. I'm really keen to support the conference in any way we can, support the initiatives that you stand for. No question of doubt there's going to be a very different looking economy after COVID. It's going to be different. It's going to require innovation, new ideas. It's going to feel a bit different, and quite rightly so. So thank you for everything you're doing with new ideas and new innovation. To help these ambitions, UK government is intending to spend 2.4% of GDP on research and development in the next 5 or 6 years. That's a big commitment. It shows, I hope, that we are serious about what we want to do and how we want to help bodies like yours achieve your own goals. And ultimately our aim here in Wales is to do 3 things. First of all, it's to level up. It's to try and make sure that everybody anywhere in Wales has the same degree of opportunity as possible. Secondly, it's to sustain and create jobs, maybe of a different kind than we used to over the next few years. So jobs and livelihoods will be central to this. And thirdly, of course, is to meet our net zero ambitions. Everybody knows what they are. Everybody knows what the timescale is. Everybody knows that it's an obligation, but it's also an opportunity. So thanks to everybody involved in that. I'm sure we'll achieve those objectives in the timescale that we've set. And if we do, it will be down to the work that you and your colleagues have been able to do.
At UKRI, we're very supportive of the creation of networks to support a vibrant research and innovation system. We care deeply about improving the diversity, engagement, resilience and connectivity within the system. You can only create really good research and innovation when you bring lots of diverse people with diverse ideas together. And that is what creates richer ideas and better solutions. We look forward to continuing to work with Welsh researchers and innovators on UK-wide opportunities.
Hello everyone. As Thales, we've been very proud to develop a thriving relationship with the university community in Wales. Our work developing the National Digital Exploitation Centre and our Resilient Works Living Laboratory in Unveil has been a partnership between us as industry, the Welsh Government and the universities of South Wales and Cardiff. We are exploring great future work with Bangor and Glyndŵr. But our perspective is always global. We compete in the UK and we compete in the world markets, in a world that is always getting more competitive, relying increasingly on networks of people and innovation. We know it is more important than ever to share expertise and intellectual firepower. We do this as a company, we do this as an industry, and we need to do this as an innovation community. As companies, investors, industrial innovators, we want to be able to access the combined innovation capability of Welsh universities. This is why it is my great pleasure to welcome the idea of Wales Innovation Network. As partners with your universities and a partner in Wales' future economy, we wish the network well, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Just a few weeks ago, we at the CBI published a new economic strategy for the UK. We call it Seize the Moment to transform our economy for the decade ahead. And to pull that off, we are going to need a stronger than ever alliance between universities and business, working on a whole range of challenges, but perhaps the greatest of all, in economy like the modern economy, is for Britain to lead the world on innovation. And that's why I'm so pleased that universities in Wales have come together to form the Wales Innovation Network, which will look at research, development, insight and learning to push ahead the degree of innovation in the Welsh part of the economy, and hopefully for the lesson to catch on in all the devolved nations and regions of the UK. Congratulations for what you're doing. We're incredibly interested to hear what you're learning and to partner with you in the months and years to come.
So thank you very much to all the presenters for those videos. I hope you'll agree that that has really set the scene for us very, very well, and the importance of the launch of WIN, the creation of WIN. I'm now very pleased to be able to move on and invite Reid to say a few words, to speak to us, to give us a keynote speech for today. Graham's already been mentioned by Julie in her introduction. As a man who's really been doing the basic work that was carried out to lead to the creation of WIN. So it's a great pleasure for me personally to hand over now to you, Graham, and look forward to hearing your speech. Thank you. Graham.
Thank you very much, Hal. Good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be in Wales, and I just wish that I could be there in person instead of joining you on a video link. We've heard already just how much enthusiasm there is for research and innovation in Wales. And the reason for that enthusiasm came across consistently through the messages we've heard. It's because of the fundamental importance of research and innovation to the future economy and well-being of society right across Wales, in every part of Wales. But let's take a step back for a moment. About a year ago, Paul Boyle, the Vice-Chancellor of Swansea University, asked me to offer some advice on how Welsh universities might work together even more effectively to respond to challenges in the environment for research funding. We are at a period of history when the UK government has made unprecedented commitments to raise public spending on research and innovation. The UKRI budget has already risen by quite remarkable amounts over the last 5 years. But funding from EU structural funding, ERDF and ESIF, has come to an end. That was an important part of the research and innovation ecosystem in Wales, and it will no longer receive financial support. The UK government has a strong narrative on levelling up and on regional development, but we've yet to discover how much emphasis will be put on research and innovation. And I see no signs of the main funding stream, the Shared Prosperity Fund, being devolved. So Welsh universities are at a moment of considerable opportunity, but also considerable challenge. Now, around the UK, groups of universities are forming together into various networks and clubs and collaborations. It feels to me as if barely a week goes by without me learning of some new grouping that has taken place, either to work on together on research proposals or to work together on the commercialization of research. Some Welsh universities have a long history of participating in groups like the Russell Group or GW4 and several others. And of course, Welsh universities also have a long history of collaborating with each other on individual programs and individual missions. But all too often, those collaborations are built from scratch every time. And that's hard work. It's a slow process in a fast-moving world. And so when I prepared my report last year for Universities Wales, I set out proposals to streamline collaboration between Welsh universities. Not to take over from existing collaborations and partnerships, but to provide an additional opportunity for universities in Wales to agree a protocol under which they could form future collaborations. So that in future, for example, they would have pre-agreed, they would already have agreed how they were going to share intellectual property emerging from research, how they would share research facilities, how they might recruit researchers into a collaboration between institutions, and how they might work together to make funding proposals to UKRI, to business partnerships, to research charities, and others. The idea is that by agreeing a protocol in advance, an individual collaboration wouldn't start from scratch. It would start from a settled position so that the collaboration could form more quickly, and actually so that it could dissolve more quickly at the end of a project, releasing resources for yet further new ideas. It's about making Welsh universities more agile, but also tapping into the most extraordinary range of capabilities that exist in the combined population of Welsh universities, but which no individual university has all of its own. So the ability to form new collaborations quickly around opportunities for funding and opportunities for business collaboration would tap into that wonderful diversity of histories, locations, missions, and business networks that exist right across the community of Welsh universities, and together adds up to so much more than any single university could ever have on its own. Now, let's be clear, there are risks in this approach. And I think that it's worth facing up to the risks at the start and not pretending that this is a straightforward endeavour. I can see at least 3 risks that are worth focusing on. First of all, there's a risk that this is done with insufficient scale. The big reward comes if most or all Welsh universities participate in the Welsh Innovation Network. That way, we bring together the greatest diversity of capability networks, rather than only bringing together a little bit of the Welsh population. I think there's also a risk that it is done with insufficient substance. It is very easy and rather enjoyable to get together and talk about stuff, and universities are just as good as anybody else at getting together and talking about stuff. But is the Welsh Innovation Network actually going to agree a protocol for the difficult things? Is it going to agree a protocol that includes the sharing of intellectual property? Is it going to agree a protocol for recruiting staff into perhaps a collaboration? Is it going to agree a protocol for sharing facilities and equipment? These are difficult things. They require trust. They require time. And that takes me to the next risk. I think there's a risk that we don't allow enough time for this to mature before making an assessment of whether or not it works. You cannot flick a switch and create this sort of protocol overnight. It's not enough to have a small group of people that are signed up to it. It needs time to percolate through a wider population of university academics and administrators to build a larger population of people that feel comfortable in working this way alongside all the other forms of partnership that they've got. But my final risk is perhaps the biggest one of all, and that's the risk of sitting and waiting for a fair share or a Welsh share of UK funding, because I see no sign at all of that happening. Instead, I see a world in which there is no limit to the amount of UKRI funding that can be won by Welsh universities. There is no upper limit to what can be secured for Wales, but there is no lower limit either. Wales will win as much as it can secure in competitions. What it won't get is a formulaic allocation of the sort that characterised some of the European structural funds of the past. And it's against that background that I think it's so important that Wales adds another string to its bow, building something like the Welsh Innovation Network, not to substitute for existing partnerships, but to add a further layer of opportunity, and in particular, to streamline this difficult process of building collaborations. I've been really struck by the level of enthusiasm from Welsh universities. Of course, there are questions. There are lots of points of detail that we have not yet worked through. Of course, there are some people that are skeptical about it. I think that it would be surprising if it was anything else. But the overall response I've had is one of considerable enthusiasm and energy, and that's been backed up by considerable enthusiasm and energy from HEFQ, who moved very quickly to provide funding to support the early years of WIN, funding perhaps that riskiest of all phases, when things are getting started, when there is so much uncertainty, when there are so many ideas to explore, but before the payback has arrived. And I thought that the pace at which HEFQ and universities moved to get this to work was really impressive, and a good signal of just how fleet of foot the Welsh academic community can be. That gives me considerable confidence and enthusiasm for what's yet to come. And I'll just take this opportunity to wish all Welsh universities and the WIN network great success in the future. Thank you for your attention. Hywel, back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Graham, for a very, very interesting speech. It's really, really important to reflect on the fact that you've talked about the opportunities, but also about the challenges that we face. And I'm sure that we'll be able to sort of dig a little deeper into those during the panel discussion session that we're now going to move into. So, Jochen, Graham, thank you very much once again for your comments, much appreciated. So we do now move to the next phase of this meeting, which is the panel discussion. We've got three panelists, so I'm very pleased to welcome them. Kelly Byrne, Chief Exec of Cardiff Capital City Region, City Deal, Dan Shah from Director of Investment Strategy and System Insight from UKRI, and Dr. Annie Tubaji, Senior Lecturer in Economics from Swansea University, and the 2021 winner of the Early Career Researchers Dillwyn Medal for Social Sciences awarded by the Learner Society of Wales. As we move into this session, I'd like to invite all of you, all who are here at today's meeting, to feed in questions. Sarah Moss has written to you, inviting you to do so. Please use the Q&A function. And there's also an opportunity to upvote questions as well. So I'm going to assume that, 1 year and a bit into Zoom, you all know how to upvote. And what we're going to try and do is take the most popular questions, really. Hopefully we'll be able to get through all the questions, but we'll prioritize them in that way. So do please feel empowered and motivated to submit your questions. So to get the panel session going, then I'm going to start with Kelly and invite Kelly to respond really to what she's just heard from Graham. And just as you do that, Kelly, maybe just to introduce yourself a little bit more than I did. So, Diolch, Kelly, thank you. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Howell, and good morning, everybody. Really nice to be here from a not so sunny Cardiff capital region. I think what I really wanted to talk about on the back of what Graham has just said is really the way in which the Cardiff capital region can work alongside WIN. Because, Graham was talking about the massive enthusiasm and the energy that we have around research, development and innovation in Wales. But we're really only going to be able to convert that enthusiasm to grow in our capability if we all work together. Yes, the university network is important, but we have to grow the network beyond that. That's important from a Cardiff capital region perspective, not just because we are an investor, but because we have convening power. We're increasingly growing our regional institutional capacity to be able to take advantage of some of those opportunities, and they are competitive, as we know, but also to help avoid some of those risks that Graham spoke about around scale, substance and thinking for the long term. So, we are in unprecedented times. I know we keep saying it, but if you just think, Howell, of everything that's going on at the moment, new plan for growth, levelling up, R&D places strategy, a new innovation strategy, innovation deals, a new office for science announced this week. It seems to me that, there are two huge priorities emerging: the UK as a science superpower and connecting the union. So some really important things for us to think about there. So it can seem a bit overwhelming, and we can decide to sit it out while we get our heads around it, or we can take the attitude that there really is no time to waste, which is exactly where I think we need to be. So this agenda is really important to me because it's about a place-based environment. It's about having that ability and capability, I think, to move and to be able to respond to real-world problems because we're closer to them at a regional level. We see, I suppose, the region through the prism of place, not the prism of party. And I think that democratic legitimacy really does compel us to act in quite a different way. And a different way because I think we have to define the innovation system differently. It's not just about universities, business and technology, huge opportunities in relation to solving big societal problems through public service innovation and thinking about civic action. Those things are important to me because in the Cardiff capital region, we've got some of the most prosperous places, cheek by jowl with some of the least prosperous. So this ability to think about how we give shape and structure to investments and interventions, if we're going to get a much more sustainable and equitable impact, is really, really important. I won't talk about the dearth of R&D in the region because we all know the story. But we have some real potential around our economic, our industrial scale clusters, and I think we've got to fight to give a real sense of distinctiveness to those in the future. But if I can just say briefly, Howell, what I think the Cardiff capital region can contribute to this agenda. I think, one is something around influence and visibility. If we are emerging now as the key place-based institution in the Cardiff capital region, we have to think carefully about our influence and visibility. And I know radical federalism is the agenda, and I get it. but we've also got to think about our seat at the table of UK government as well. UKRI is important. Many more of us are now at the table of the different research councils. But there's ARIA, there's the Plan for Growth, there's the new Office for Science, you know, the R&D Places Group. It's not just about representation, it's the way that we organise and we hunt as a pack. And I think that's a really important principle. The next thing is being competitive. I think Graham has drilled into me for years. You know, you've got to win the race to succeed in this new environment. And we've put together a compelling investment prospectus. You know, we weren't as fast as West Midlands, but we got off the blocks quite quickly. Not just asks, not just give us investment, because we see our role very much as being a co-investor, risk for reward, shaping and creating new markets, but setting out a progressive programme around fiscal levers, incentives, relocation of UK government departments, what we can offer by way of data capability, which is something we could be really well known for in the region. So learning to invest in building our own resilience, I think, is an important principle. So the public sector, you know, we're not just grant givers, we're co-investors. We're here to shape and create new markets. And I think that mission economy approach that the Minister so eloquently described in his introduction is critical. So we have funds, and again, they're not just funds that will give out grants to people we like and propositions we think may be okay. You know, challenge funds that look at solving big societal problems, intractable challenges that have been with us for far too long, thinking about how we leverage the power of the public balance sheet. So we've got a programme that invests in building public service innovation capacity, but a big challenge fund as well that we can use innovative procurement to procure innovation, if that makes sense. We've got a premises fund. We're building capability around an innovation investment fund because we recognise the dearth of risk capital, that patient continuity finance that we need to establish. That isn't just a business fund. That is about thinking about the role of universities and that kind of triple helix environment that we need to create. I suppose I need to mention corporate joint committees, which I know don't roll off the tongue, but they are, I suppose, our version of combined authorities. In the Cardiff Capital region, we will be a corporate joint committee by the 28th of February next year. But that means that the Cardiff Capital region will be an entity in its own right. It will have a balance sheet, borrowing powers. It can go for bigger UK-based investment, wider private investment. It can have fiscal levers and incentives. It can have, you know, tax raising powers. All of these things we need to bring together as a rich part of the agenda if we're really going to drive the research and innovation agenda in the region. And I think, you know, as Graham was said, the opportunities, I think, are as big as we want them to be. You know, we've got the Hendy review of union connectivity, the new UK infrastructure bank, you know, 12 billion of capitalisation, lending at gilt bond rates. We need to be thinking about how we can work together to build a pipeline, go up to Leeds and knock the door, not take no for an answer, build relationships and build the kind of network that I think will allow us to succeed. So I suppose what I wanted to sum up by saying, Howell, is that, you know, this has to be a positive sum game for us all. I think we've got some huge potential around our clusters. You know, we're not going to win the same race as everyone else. And I think we've got to think about distinction. We've got to think about the interface of our clusters, where we've got enabling and pervasive technologies, where we can really build a strong base. But, you know, clearly levelling up can't be done top down. It has to be done bottom up. We've got to build together that institutional capacity for innovation. So I think there's a big challenge for how we join up. But one thing I will leave you with, you know, and I've been thinking about this, the agenda seems to be changing. The 2.4% target, you know, we were initially talking about public investment in R&D. I think there's a real recognition now of the contribution the private sector, businesses, British Business Bank, the new National Infrastructure Bank, how we all need to be on board together to drive progress towards that target. So research-led innovation is really, really important. But I think in the future, we may need to grow a proposition around innovation-led research. So thank you very much for letting me have a couple of minutes, and I look forward to joining in, Howell.
Super, thanks, Kelly. Lots of really important points there. I'm keeping an eye on the Q&As already, and I think we will be coming back to you, Kelly, before too long. Dan, if I may move to you next, thank you for being with us. I particularly like the last part of your job title, the System Insight part. So we look forward particularly to hearing from you, Dan. And once again, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks very much for having me here. I am, in some respects, very new to the role and to understanding what the Systems Insight part of the job pertains to. But in some ways, I feel like I'm very old. And I remember talking with you in your university's Wales role about sort of internationalisation, working with Amanda. Gwen Williams spent half her time sitting next to me in my UK role. And of course, I've worked with Graham and with Paul in the past and look forward to learning from Annie and from Kelly. And I think one thing that I would really pull out is the value of the proposition of the network that's being put forward here, the congruence with some of the thinking that we are doing in UKRI, inspired by the kind of systems, ecosystem thinking that Ottoline brings to the table, and the timeliness of your doing this. So on the first one, I think, Graham is, of course, spot on. There is something of a virtue in the diversity and strength of the university system in Wales, in that it lets you build a network which can be complementary as well as additive, in the way that other constellations of the same number of institutions might not be. And I think that gives you a strength. It gives you an opportunity to overcome coordination barriers when it comes to looking for collaborative propositions that other structures may not have. And as you pointed out in your introductory remarks, Graham, it enables you to be anticipatory of the likely very complicated geometry of opportunities and propositions that may be coming our way in the future. And I suspect things will only get more complicated and more uncertain, at least for the short to medium term. So the more you understand each other and the distinctive roles that you can each play as members of the network, and have that facility not only to have nice meetings, but to understand how to pull together an adaptive and a larger pitch, whether it's to business, whether it's to the public sector, or whether it's to other forms of hybridity. I think that's a real asset and right to be thinking about it. I also think that we all, and I include myself in this, can get better actually at communicating and celebrating the things that are achieved within the Welsh Research and Innovation system, because this has signal effects. It inspires people. It can drive culture changes within universities, but also within businesses and the community. And it can attract attention. It can attract attention from potentially mobile resources within the UK, but also that footloose FDI R&D, which is going to be thinking about its long-term future post-COVID and where it chooses to locate itself. And I think we can celebrate, yes, the big successful investments in the compound semiconductors that has come through collaborations, including the support of UKRI Strength in Places Fund, but also the successes of the individuals. So the successes of people like Deborah Coughlin at Model X Studios, who's just won the Women Innovation Award winner, the successes of individual projects, which not only are valuable in their own right, but can send signal effects to others. So the recent STFC investments in technology at Cardiff University, looking at new ways to do the commercial option from sensors. I think that there's also something that I would be really keen to learn from you as the network develops and you start to understand what works. I'm very keen that we take a what works lens to understanding how the R&I ecosystem works. We are, as UKRI, the carrier of the responsibility to be a good steward for the system, but we are seldom going to be the largest single investor in any university or in any piece of research that travels on its way from the fundamentals in the lab all the way through to industrial application in a new unicorn or in a global supply chain. So I do think we have a special responsibility as that system level agent, but we're never going to be the only player. So understanding the complementarities, the leveraging in effects that we can have from the way we do things is really important. And I would encourage you to learn from people like Graham, to learn from your own very successful experience, Hill, in attracting European funding in the past as we go into Horizon Europe and try and get some more of that, but also understanding what other university networks have done, both domestically and internationally. And actually, in some respects, the difference between university networks domestically pales into insignificance compared to the differences between different systems around the world. And I think there's things to be learned from that global perspective as well as from the domestic one. I think that the congruence with some of the conversations I just came from this morning within UKRI is that we are thinking about not only the individual, activities that we do as a responsible funder, but what are the shifts we would want to make for the ecosystem as well as for ourselves, looking to the long term. And at a high level, I think these are things like connectivity, which you are embodying in creating WIN, diversification, not only in the sense of place, but in the sense of the types of organizations that are doing research and the types of collaborations between them. And that would include things like bringing more SMEs through their relationships with locally embedded universities into contact with the global networks that maybe larger, more research-intensive universities can bring to them. Also questions of resilience. And personally, I think this is resilience not only in responding to the shocks that have come to us, but resilience in that sense of being able to adapt and seize the positive outcomes that may come from the opportunities coming down the line. And of course, engagement, and engagement in the wide sense. Engagement in the sense of reminding communities at a moment when the value of research and innovation is so present in every vaccination center, why what universities do through the innovation that we and so many other people help to enable matters for people's lives. So I think that's sort of brings me to the last observation, which is this is so timely. Well done. It's timely because of the specifics of thinking about what building back better really means in concrete terms, but also timely in terms of the things that you see reading out of the integrated review. The future of the UK's place in the world is going to be heavily dependent on the success of our research and innovation. It's one of our sources of revealed comparative advantage in a global and contested knowledge economy. But also the future of us as individuals, of our families, of our children, is hugely dependent on the ability to collaborate and use research and innovation to address global challenges that we can't address on our own. And it's timely because we're entering an extraordinarily and hopefully fruitfully complicated set of decision-making environments. So decisions will be made about the success of funding to ERDF, which has been, I think, distinctively valuable to Wales. I think there was something like 125 euros per capita in R&I out of the last phase of ERDF compared to 15 euros per capita in England. It's also in the run-up to what we hope is going to be an innovation strategy. It's also in the run-up, as Graham said, to a settlement through the spending review in which there is no upper limit to what institutions in Wales can win from competitive funding from a national body like ourselves, or indeed from other schemes. But there is the opportunity to engage, to network, to articulate and to celebrate the virtues of what you have done, to grow the size of that cake as we go into the spending review. And we cannot pretend that it will be easy, but the announcements of things like an Office for Science and Technology strategy at prime ministerial level give us reasons to be optimistic. But I think universities, businesses and communities all have a place to play in articulating the value of maintaining that investment in ways that can maintain a healthy ecosystem going into a spending review.
Thanks very much indeed, Dan. Really, really useful, interesting comments. I'm sure, again, as I said to Kelly, we'll come back to some of those in the question and answer session. So it's my great pleasure now to move to ask Annie to make her contributions. Thank you, Annie. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you very much, and I'm really happy to be here and to celebrate all the panelists who talked before me, because they really said important things. Well, let me put my own perspective from who I am. I'm a cultural and regional economist, And I understand very well the challenges in front of Wales in the sense of being the regionally left behind place, which deserves not only to catch up, not only to remain resilient in the current crisis and perhaps many other coming ecological and economic crises ahead, but also a place that has an absolute right to claim fair development and equal development with the rest of the world, not only to catch up, but maybe to be competitive and to pass beyond it. And this, of course, depends on research and innovation, as we know from endogenous growth theory and from the practice all around the world. And Wales does have this potential, but as my research has been showing, and not only my research, well, I'm working on something which is called culture-based development. It's quite close to place-based development. And it is looking at the way that value is made, the way that we think about the world, the way that we cooperate and whom we think we can cooperate with, and the strategy that we build for cooperating. And on the other side, how we value things in the sense, what do we think we are good enough for? What do we aim for? What do we think we have to aim for? And these things, Wales has actually been good at in ways that Wales is underestimating. You have been cooperating and you have been on the international scheme very active historically. You have been the people who were supporting the identity of other countries. You have been supporting the identity of Bulgaria, for instance. And this is remembered, and these are kind of channels and partnerships which remain there, no matter if you're part of the European Union or not. They're much recent partnerships, which Wales has been very typically for Wales, kind of silently, but diligently and properly working on. So the University of Swansea is a partner of an international global network for learning cities. And you have been one of the main contributors there. And this is a network which is called Pascal, and which is supported by UNESCO and OECD. And it is Wales and Little Swansea who are one of the main locomotives in this thing. And I'm part of the I'm representing Swansea University now, but I have been invited by the people who for years have been working on this, okay? And there is a very wonderful lady, Judith James, who has been working on this and together in partnership with people from Glasgow University and so on. So there are things on which you can build and can be brought further into this. And they're very strong and powerful and respected networks here in the UK and very well connected internationally. There is also Wizard, another big network, which is very well established and very good expertise. So these are existing partnerships that have to be figured out, put together, and the synergies which already exist to be used for it. And then from the other point of view of the value, how we make value and what we aim for, I think this is one of the problems that Wales has shown over the centuries. You underestimate, well, of course, because of the Welsh Note and because of different kind of, cultural discriminations, which are a phenomenon existing all over the world, and we don't need to be over politically correct about it. I mean, what was, and it has to be recognized. And I'm studying the effects of the Welsh Note on the development of Welsh people, on the job market, on the different kind of innovation activities and so on. There is a syndrome of putting the target lower for Wales. And I'll give you an anecdotal evidence for this. Recently, there was this initiative for the 15-minute city, okay? An idea for local development. And then I was at a very nice meeting aiming to propel development of Wales by people who really had a very strong even sense for Welsh identity. They were saying, well, maybe for Wales, it should be the 20-minute city. And I'm like, why? You do deserve the best. I mean, you have to aim at 12-minute city, if anything. And this is coming to the challenges that Graham was talking about the scale in a different value-minded sense. And when I'm saying this, it's not just a question of positive psychology. There is serious work from Dan McGee from Princeton University that is showing how not only stereotypes and otherness in the sense of somebody else to repress you, but how the most dangerous thing that can happen to people is the negative stereotype thinking about themselves. So there is some need, in my opinion, for promoting in Wales the targeting as high as everybody else, because all the Russell Group universities and so on, so they're nothing better than respecting their own prestige better. And what they have as background in terms of strength, yes, it is there. They have some objective qualities, but there are people in Wales who can build up the same kind of quality, because these kind of skills, they're man-made and they're made in the process of teaching. And there is a process of taking children from Wales to be educated in Oxford very often, and so there are special channels established for this. But it can be also here, and this is while the other challenges that Graham listed, I see them more as opportunities. You can seek for having more scale, you can seek for having more substance, and for keeping yourself out of the comfort zone, because this is where innovation happens actually. And then also, yes, fast thinking always has a sort of challenges and maybe mistakes, but okay, that's it. In the free competition, you have to be fast, you have to be open to the surprise and to react at your best. But there is one more challenge, which maybe you can learn from the existing examples from around the world. Well, where I come from is Bulgaria. And this area of Europe has a big problem, which is the brain drain, okay? And this is exactly what can happen to Wales if it loses the train, because there are a lot of challenges. There is now the opportunity perhaps to gather money and to solve this problem, but if these problems are not solved properly, you may start losing even more intensively. If the economic problems keep increasing, you'll keep losing your young people, your able people. Talent is distributed uneven across the world because it gets attracted by economic potential. So this is an obligation, not only for innovation, not for the economic development now, but exactly the resilience depends on keeping the researchers, keeping the people who are able in all the disciplines to be contributing here in Wales, and to be turning into Wales if they go to Oxford or to Cambridge or wherever, in order to develop the place. Because if this does not happen, what happens to countries like mine is called the shrinking regions. And you don't want this to happen, right? And Bulgaria is beautiful and Wales is beautiful, but the economic opportunity still matters. So this is the big challenge that I think shouldn't be underestimated. So that's from me. Thank you very much for that. And Sarah said, do challenge. So do challenge yourselves, okay? And the celebration will come after the results. Now there is a very important bell being rung and everybody has to gather and to put all the effort.
Thank you so much, Annie. I think I could sort of take the next 30 minutes just asking questions myself of what you just talked about. A lot of them ring rather true, but sense must prevail. So I'd like to go to the Q&A session now, and as I said, take the most popular questions first. So the first question, posted by Chris Taylor: what do the panelists think success for the network will look like? And who'd like to have a go at that first? Do you want to have a crack, Graham?
Well, there are several versions of success, but the one that I would look to first of all is actually winning more money for Wales from sources outside Wales. It's not just UKRI, although clearly UKRI is a huge player in this, but actually increasing the amount of research and innovation funding won in competitive processes from organisations outside Wales.
Thanks, Graham. Any other contributions?
Yeah, I would echo that, Howell, as well. You know, make exactly the same point as Graham, really. I mean, sometimes you'd think sort of UKRI was the sort of extent of our horizon. And my experience is that, you know, there are loads of opportunities out there, wide networks, investor networks, private networks, you know, you name it. I think there's a real will after such a long period of stasis, really, to come to the fore and back the things, not just back the winners. I think it's about backing the willing. And I think if this network can show that it's willing, then I think the sky is the limit.
Dan?
Just to add to that, I think also success can be measured by the economic impact that can come not only from the resources that are leveraged in, but actually from the network's ability to harness and absorb innovations that might have come from something funded elsewhere, including sort of national infrastructures that aren't going to be mobile, but bring the benefits of those back to Wales. And I think there's also a process or a cultural benefit that I would see as being part of success, that you learn from it, that you learn about each other, you learn how to collaborate in different configurations when the opportunities arise, and you learn the confidence actually to respond to Annie's point there. And just to build on that, I think if there's an opportunity to harness the power of brain circulation rather than brain drain, and where people have moved away, to see them as, say, India or China do, as a diaspora who can be investors, who can be collaborators, because they are a diaspora with an identity that is different from that of other parts of the United Kingdom. And that can be an asset as well as a loss that they're not here to be PIs from the city that they were born in.
Thank you, Dan.
Also, kind of an opportunity and measure maybe for the success of the network is bringing money from outside of UK, because the EU funds are still open and they have to be addressed with the past partners and even with new partners. Why not? And also the top down and up and how change can happen. I think there are also examples from Wales that people can be super creative and important in innovation. There was a person who was homeless for a period. And now he's one of the leading innovators in Wales for using blockchain technology. Okay, so there is so much potential, and people who are disadvantaged, people who have faced a particular problem are the ones that understand the problem the best. So nobody should be othered on the basis of anything, and just everybody should be integrated in the process of innovation and building the community and the economy.
Thanks very much indeed. So the next question is from Chris Traylor. Collaboration is a complex social process, but to me a critical feature is motivation. How can we motivate colleagues to collaborate in increasingly more complex and diverse ways when the alternative might be or might seem to be easier to do? Who would like to go first? Maybe I should ask Paul Boyle to respond to this one as the Vice Chancellor of Swansea, but maybe not. Yeah, it's a bit unfair on Paul. You want to have a go, Dan, to start with?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of things here. One is about how people perceive the motivation. So most of the people who will be looking to collaborate within a particular innovation endeavor are going to be within institutions. So there will be local sets of incentive structures that can be within the control of their managers, their institutions, and we can find ways not to penalize people for cooperating across organizational boundaries. I also think that there are incentives that relate to individuals over longer durations of time. So that more that we can do to create porosity, for example, between the university sector and the business sector, the more you can see the incentive as an individual for doing that collaboration, because it's part of a long-term pipeline of fruitful labor or of collaboration, rather than an individual sort of localized maxima. I also think that there's something for us as funders to do, which is to send the right signals. That, you know, these are things that we do care about. There are not disadvantages to being interdisciplinary when it comes to, you know, decision making. I also think though that it's not only about motivation in the sense of incentives. I think there's also motivation in that sense of sort of a passionate culture of being confident, of wanting to do things. And I think that does relate to diversity, not only between types of institutions, you know, businesses, universities, different kinds of universities, but actually across the country. You have a geographically diverse country and a socially diverse country. And if you're going to compete against the best teams in the world, or the best teams in Europe, or the best teams in the UK, you need a team of all the talents. And that's got to include people who might want to only work part-time, who might want to take time out to look after their children, who might not look like all the other people in the room or sound like them. And I think that's an opportunity you get from creating a group with common values signed up to something. So there's really practical things, including the incentive structures that vice chancellors and deans and so on put on academics. But I think there's really bottom-up cultural things about the way we show what we value in the way we work with other people.
Thanks, Dan. I guess this question is probably about the motivation of academic staff, is it? I'm not sure I should read that into it, but on the assumption that it is. Annie, would you like to comment as a member of the community?
Yes, actually, this is the good news. While culture can be a barrier, and it is, and it's evolutionary created to protect us, you know, from the uncertainty. The good news is that under all the cultural shapings, we are all people, and there is one real barrier for which we do not cooperate, and this is the fear. The fear that we will be othered, the fear that we will be subject to cultural discrimination. So the answer how to build networks and how to make people open up is just to signal that you yourself are prepared to love them and prepared to cooperate with them and prepared to be valuing them person. And then what is known from science is that you need to have 6 people in a row willing to do this without a failure in order for innovative ideas to really flow. So keep this in mind, that you may be one of these 6 and motivate others to be the next one that will pass the fire ahead, so that you have the circulation of ideas and cooperation going forward.
Thank you so much. Panelists, I hope you don't mind, but we've got quite a few questions here, so I'll go on to the next question. I'm not sure who is able to answer this, but maybe Graham, you can have a shot at it. It's referring back to your previous recommendations to the Welsh Government. And the question is, how important is it that Professor Reid's 2017 recommendations to the Welsh Government are also implemented? Some 60 million brackets annual of accepted recommendations remain outstanding. Appreciate we haven't got anyone from Welsh Government here to really take that head on, but is it something you could talk around, Graham?
So, Hal, I think this question probably refers to the review of research and innovation I did for the Welsh Government in 2018, where I recommended a sizable uplift in QR funding. And I made that recommendation by comparing levels of QR funding in the 4 nations of the UK with levels of competitively won research funding. And there was a clear and very strong correlation between the level of QR and the level of competitive success, which is not rocket science, because, I mean, you know, QR is the money you use to build bids. And so if you take away the QR, you take away the ability to bid. The Welsh Government accepted that proposal, but have not backed it up with as much money as I recommended. And I think that that remains a disadvantage to the Welsh research community. And there is no ducking that, no pretending that that disadvantage isn't there. That was part of the backdrop against which I suggested the current arrangements, because you can offset that disadvantage with an advantage of a different type. And I think that there's an opportunity here for the Welsh to, instead of focusing only on one dimension of this, be creative and jump in a different direction. And I think that this form of behaviour will offset part of the disadvantage which remains on the Welsh landscape.
Thanks, Graham. I'll move on again.
Sorry, Howell. I was just going to say in response to that, you know, is it so much about sort of waiting around for this full set of, you know, recommendations to be implemented, or is it about sort of asking the question, how do we do our parts? And I think, you know, Graham's report has been very influential, and you know, we've just got on with some of it. You know, I talked about a £50 million innovation investment fund, risk capital, patient continuity finance to drive different types of research and development, thinking about clusters and the ecosystemic conditions we need to create across different players and different environments. So yeah, you know, I think we can sort of, you know, ask ourselves, is it, you know, has it been implemented? But there's also a bigger ask, which I think is about how can we all play our part and just get on and do some of it anyway.
Point taken.
And
Kelly, thank you.
Besides recommendations, there are also best practices, and one can see what other networks are doing and what kind of agendas they're following. So this is another pocket to tap on. Pascal, for instance, is all about learning from each other, learning cities, what they strive to achieve and how they achieve it in order to be really leaders in their areas.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I'm a great fan of the Kelly Burney School of Management. Just get on with it. I think that's absolutely the right thing to do.
Thank you. So the next question really is about, you know, how is this going to play across the whole of Wales? So obviously with Kelly here, we've heard this morning about Cardiff and the capital region area. That this is a question from Bettina Schmidt that has got a lot of support, is what about the rest of Wales? I'd also like to hear more about how the network will work. So kind of slightly more practical question maybe. Paul, do you want to comment on that? Can I bring you in on that, do you think?
Yes, thanks, Hal. I'm very happy to contribute a little bit at least. I think one of the things we have to bear in mind, of course, is this is a preview event. And so we're right in the middle now developing not only plans for who might be the new director for WIN and also how the structures around that will work. Clearly, we had a lot of engagement from HEFCU, and we've discussed with them in some detail the sorts of KPIs that HEFCU would be content with as a result of providing some support for this network. But we're going to have to think carefully about how we make those into rather more precise indicators for that group of people who's going to be employed within the network. So that work is well underway. And we also have, we're bringing together a panel which will include all of the PVCRs or PVCs for innovation across Wales, who will come together and help steer the work of this group, reporting into all of the Vice-Chancellors. A critical point, of course, is that this is about the whole of Wales. This is about all of the universities in Wales being participants. And it's also much more than just universities, of course. We collaborate with a wide range of other bodies, and that's got to be at the heart of everything we try and deliver through WIN, because we will only secure the sorts of funding that Graham has encouraged us to seek if we can really bring together different partnerships to achieve that. I think we're in a particularly special moment in Wales that will allow for that. We obviously have a situation where Wales has brought together a whole series of partnerships through the structural funds in a way that the rest of the UK did not have that similar experience. And that should be experience for us to be able to really build upon to develop a vision for what it is that we think we can achieve as a consortium, not just of universities, but of a whole range of different other organisations.
Thanks, Paul. So the strong message really to go back is that this is very, very much an all Wales network. And though we've heard today specifically from the Cardiff Capital region, there are growth funds in other parts of Wales, and the intention is very, very much an all Wales network.
And it's also a responsibility of the universities, because the university may be in a more developed part of Wales, but it can focus its project, and maybe this is a responsibility of all universities to have this as a priority in what they will be trying to find innovation for. both in terms of patented economic innovation and social innovation, to support the areas which are left behind. This is already a discussion which is on the map, very much prominent in economic research, and it simply has to be prioritized.
Thanks, Sandy.
You have to help the areas which are left behind. It's not them to help themselves alone, to pull themselves as some Baron Munchausen. This is part of the cooperation. Those who are a little bit ahead, to pull them out.
That's a nice lead into the next question that I've got to read. I want to read out, and I think I have to ask you, Dan, if you'll take this. How does UKRI see the levelling up agenda applying to the use of its funds? I'm not thinking of anything like formulaic allocations to UK nations and regions, but rather to schemes for encouraging levelling up developments, as we've had some experience in Wales in the past with individual research councils. That's from Phil Gummett. You happy to take that, Dan?
I'm happy to take it. I approach it with a degree of modesty since I'm only a month in, and I have a big briefing with the Places team this afternoon after this to give me more of the details. If I can just bridge actually from the answer I wanted to give to the last question, which is in terms of the whole of Wales benefit, I think there is something to be said for using your ability to all be together on a single Zoom or Teams call in a way that was much harder when we were talking about going from north to south or vice versa to all be in a room. But it takes you beyond the capabilities of, say, all of England, where there's just too many universities to actually come together to coordinate on something. Use that agility as a way to benefit everywhere, and celebrate the things that are going on in other places. Celebrate the fact that Bangor and Glastonbury are doing COVID responsive work that we're funding to monitor background levels of the COVID. Use the endogenous research subjects. Use the fact that, you know, Swansea are using drones to measure tidal effects at the moment, and that those good news stories can be a way to help crowd things in. In terms of the levelling up agenda, I'm still learning what the thinking is, but some thoughts from me as a relative newcomer. One is that I think we're thinking about the role of research and innovation in levelling up, rather than just levelling up research and innovation. And I think that's really important, because going back to the points about understanding an ecosystem, understanding the role that we can play that can have benefits on the wider ecosystem. There are within universities, all the relationships between universities and business, obviously really complicated, but potentially really beneficial spillover effects. So we want to have that more systems insight view that, for example, research success in a university can boost the profile of that university, or indeed of the city or the nation in which it's in, which can help you attract FDI, or it can help you attract international students and staff whose talents go on to increase your propensity to gain future research benefits. So there are virtuous circles that we need to understand at the level of system level connectivity. I think also we are doing some place thinking, trying to understand how the different parts of the existing offer that we already have can fit together into a simpler toolkit to try and articulate this, and to help especially businesses who tend to have less dedicated time searching for new research grant funding opportunities than academics do, to navigate the system, and we hide some of the wiring, if you like. I don't know how far we've got on hiding the wiring. I suspect not as far as we would like to go, but certainly instinctively that to me seems like a really important point. But I think going back to the relationship between the role of research and innovation and levelling up is the connectivity of the benefit. And I think that there's more that we can do. If we think about connectivity, diversification, the resilience of the system, more engagement, to spread the benefit of that levelling up effect, even if there are things that we can't move. So if we had more funding for digital research infrastructures, a lot of the benefits could adhere to Swansea, to Bangor, even if there is only one centre doing the management of a synchrotron and it happens to be the other side of the border. I think there'd be more opportunity to absorb the innovation that may have come from somewhere else into the supply chain not only for the companies that are already linked in with Airbus and compound semiconductors, but those further away in the supply chain that are spread more widely, but where the local multiplier effects on jobs of bringing in a higher GVA benefit to somewhere that has been a bit left behind would actually be higher than more porous places that are more routinely connected to the big highways of the economic flows. So I would say it's early thinking, and to some degree, we also are keen to see what comes out of the work that Number 10 are leading on a levelling up white paper, and particularly how this would connect to the successor resources to ERDF and what role that has in building capacity or in addressing other things that can be blockers to R&I playing a stronger role in levelling up, because there are barriers of transport infrastructure or digital connectivity that prevent all of that benefit being harnessed in the places that we most want it to be directed.
Thanks, Dan. Very interesting. Kelly, do you have any insights on this? I haven't introduced you yet as a member of the board of Research England, but wearing that hat, do you have any views on this question?
Well, I suppose, you know, Graham and I are both board members of Research England. I think there's just so much unknown at the moment, but I do think there's a real distinction between levelling up and the place-based agenda. They're not necessarily one and the same thing. So, you know, there's going to be a prospectus. We have a levelling up SAR now, so it'll be really interesting to see how things play out. But I think the point that Dan just made is a really important one. This isn't, you know, research and innovation, as important UKRI is to the agenda, it goes beyond, doesn't it? Other government departments. If you look at the integrated review of defence and the industrial strategy in defence and innovation in health, you know, there's a much wider agenda to think about when we talk about levelling up. And as I said when I gave my response to Graham's comments, you know, it can't be done from the top down. So again, we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing to influence the agenda, to get in there and to be thought leaders? Not to sit back and wait for the formula or to be told. What are we doing about it now? And I think that's a really important question to ask of ourselves. Do we want to hang around and be told and done to? Or do we want to take the opportunity to go back from today and say, this is what levelling up means to us in Wales in respect of the R&I agenda? And I think that's a really good challenge for us as a community to start to think about.
Thanks, Kelly. Annie, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I wanted to say 3 things now. The one is that there are a combination of things like standard innovation done by firms and so on and so forth, which of course is important and has to be supported, but UK and even Wales have a tradition into doing that. And there are things which are not done traditionally in Wales, which have to be done, such like support for the infrastructure and you know, leveling this up to the rest of the country. So this should not be forgotten. But there is also another form of innovation that is not talked enough, and I suppose is part of what this WIN network will be interested to do, is the social innovation. This is a different type of understanding the problems of society and responding to it. So it's not only support for the businesses, but really support for the people. There are a lot of homeless people. They cannot be just looked over as a problem. This is a part that maybe businesses, but also social solutions can be offered. And then there is a third aspect. Daniel talked about the digital economy, the artificial intelligence nowadays, and so on and so forth. But this comes to the problem of for whom is this? Is this only for the leaders? Is it only for the best companies and the most educated people that will be able to participate in that? And actually the answer to this is that you need people who understand how AI is made, but who are not interested in the business's advantage only, but who will be there to monitor how this new form of multiplier for the economy is also able to multiply the inequalities and to make the people who are poor become even poorer and weaker in this socioeconomic environment, and how this can be avoided. So this is the role of the universities and the role of the most educated part of the Welsh society to guard the interest of everybody to be equally included in the new digital economy.
Thank you ever so much. One eye on the clock, we are approaching the end of our time session, so I now need to move to ask Paul to sum up. Paul, we've got so many questions left unanswered. I'd like to ask you if you could tackle this question in your summing up, if that's okay. It says it's from Alan Palmer. It says there is also innovation occurring outside of universities, especially in SMEs. How does this important part of the Welsh Innovation Network fit into WIN? I don't know if you could kind of include that in your final closing comments, Paul. That would be nice if you could.
Yes, well, thanks very much, Alan. I will come back to that point and address it. But first of all, just in my summing up, I'd first like to just thank everyone for their contributions. Thanks, of course, to Graham for doing the work on the Strength and Diversity report in the first instance and has provided for us a real template that, as we've seen, not only have the universities reacted extremely positively, but so has HEFCU reacted positively and rapidly to implement WIN. And that, I think, is a testament to the strength of the report and the recommendations that were in that report to encourage us to really come together and make the most of the sorts of collaborations that we already have, but which we can build upon and perhaps do even better in the future. So thanks to you, Graham. Thanks also, of course, to all of the panelists and others for your contributions today. And clearly we have a lot of political support, as we saw in many of the videos at the beginning. So I think this is a great start. As we've said all along, it's a preview event. There's still a lot more work to do, but we are convinced that we have to act quickly and robustly and get on with this job, because any delay will, in a sense, be a risk to Wales as a whole, because we need to be out there trying to, as Graham has already pointed out, compete for those funds at a UK and indeed European and global scale. So that's something we're really very, very committed to. There's obviously a lot of work underway, and if you do have questions or queries specifically about the work, then you can always contact Kieran Rees at Universities Wales. I'm sure he'd be very happy to provide any feedback or put you in touch with people. I think there's other sort of slightly more general points I'd like to make. I mean, Graham did make the point we mustn't sit back and wait. We need to drive the agenda, and that's something I strongly agree with. We have to take hold of this, and that's relevant to the point you just asked me about how we're a collaboration of universities, but at the heart of all the work we do, certainly in my institution and all of the other universities in Wales, we work with small and medium-sized enterprises. We deliver with them already, and we want to build those into the partnership in a way that will make us even more productive. So going back to the point about how do we take hold, one simple argument, I think, is that I'd like to be talking to UKRI about some very practical measures to help them with levelling up. We have impact accelerator accounts in universities. They could be regional. We could have impact accelerator accounts that consortium of universities could deliver on. And I think we'd get huge added value from bringing together institutions like WIN in a way that would allow the impact accelerator accounts to have far more influence than they already do have. These are the sorts of very practical steps I think we'd really enjoy having conversations with UKRI about, because I think there are challenges to UKRI about how to deliver on that broad agenda, given the way that funding has always been allocated in the past. The final thing I'd say, just by summing up, we mustn't forget the title of this report. The report was titled Strength and Diversity for a really important reason, and that is we're bringing together a range of universities, each of which has a really different role, a different perspective, and brings different skills to the agenda. Each of the universities in Wales has a huge amount to offer in the research and innovation space, but we each do things differently, and we have different expertise. That was the aim of the report, in a sense, to make the case for bringing together a diversity of institutions. And I've been really pleased to see Ottoline at UKRI, after visiting us 2 or 3 times in Wales in the last few months, using that term, strength and diversity, when she's been talking about the ways that she wants to see the ecosystem change in a way that the collaborations will be perhaps a bit different in this new levelling up environment that we're all talking about. So I think there's real scope here for what we're doing here in Wales to actually help shape some of the other ideas going on in the rest of the UK. And as I've said continually, perhaps too often, I think we can give some practical ideas to UKRI and indeed perhaps other funders about what we might be able to do in Wales to help drive that economic growth that we all know post-pandemic is so vital. And hence the reasons why HEFCU, Welsh Government and others have given their support to what I think is going to be a really exciting period in Welsh innovation and research in the future. And what better title than WIN if we're going to go out there and really deliver on what we want to deliver on. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a summary. I hope I answered the question a little bit, Hal, that you asked me about. But back to you to finish up.
Thanks very much indeed, Paul. Well, I've got to apologise to all those in the audience who've submitted questions and we haven't been able to get around to them. My humble apologies for that. If the number of questions, the level, you know, of interest from the questions is anything to go by, it's a very, very good indication of, you know, future success. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd am ddod heddi. Diolch yn fawr iawn am y cwestiynau. Thank you very, very much indeed to all of you who came, those of you in the audience who gave your time, and of course to echo Paul's points, thank you particularly to our panelists and to Graham for your contributions. We've managed to get through all of this without anyone referencing to football and teams and success, so that's another success, I guess. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd, and prynhawn da am nawr. Thank you very much indeed.